Hey guys, Ognajteff here, and welcome back to another episode of our Road to the Old Kingdom series. Last time we built up this temple complex to the god Set, and this time we'll be working towards our ultimate goal of finishing the village. Oh. Hey Nicole, what are you doing down there? Well, I guess I can't argue with that. Come on. We got a village to build. Hello? Hello? One moment. Let me reconnect this thing. Hello? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess I'll see you guys later. Bye. Huh. Well, I guess there goes the time lapse. Guess I'll have to figure something else to do. Crap. Okay, last few here, and done. Now, despite the lack of a time-lapse now going on, I figured I may as well finish this area anyway. Just make sure it's all done. However, I'm going to actually move on to a slightly different project. If I can't complete the village in a entertaining manner, then I shall complete the village in a informative one. And quite frankly, there's actually a bit more of an interesting project I can actually be doing instead. Let's see, where did I put all my stuff? Oh, I already had it all on me. There we go. Yes, and that is actually just in behind all these houses here. Once I'm done with this last little house, we can get moving over to there. I've sort of cordoned off a little area already. I'll just meet you there. Alright, so today's little thing here, make sure I orient. Wait, that's east. Okay, good. So I actually did this right. Today, we are actually going to be skipping over the village itself and going towards the realm of the dead. Specifically, we'll be building this city's necropolis, which is Greek for City of the Dead. So quite literally, every Egyptian city would have had some form of graveyard, necropolis, or tomb structure nearby, and particularly nearby royal capitals or other large important cities. So, for example, Saqqara, which is famous for having the first pyramid at it, is famous specifically as the Memphis necropolis. Abydos had its own necropolis, and then, of course, Giza, of course, with the Great Pyramids, which is the ultimate goal of this challenge. So, today we'll be building a rectangular tomb known as a mastaba. So, a mastaba is well, the name quite literally translates to mud bench. So, mud brick bench. The whole idea is it's a rectangular figure built up above a tomb complex built underneath with a false door area where you can send offerings. And these were built across the Naqada period and well into the Old Kingdom and even Middle and later eras. Although mud bricks sort of gave way to stone the later on you go. So let's see, how do I want to build this? So a big thing to note is earlier tombs were built differently from later tombs. So in this case, we'll actually just be building... Oh, you actually scared me. Oh my god. Sea pickle. No, I'm good. I'm good. Let's see. As I was saying, tombs would have been built a bit differently. So back in this day and age, it would have just looked like normal rooms being carved out of the earth, rather than burial chambers with long tunnels or any traps or tricks. The point being, it was A, simpler to make, in an era prior to heavy construction tech. That was very important. And two, more importantly, later tomb building techniques were specifically developed to prevent grave robbings. So, last episode I asked you, what is a pyramid? And then I told you about what a benben, or sacred mound, was. How it was representative of the earth dragged above the surface of the primordial abyss of Nun. So, that is important because the pyramids themselves were directly based off of this foundation myth. But it was also the basis of the mastaba. And a pyramid, it should be noted, is just a mastaba stacked on top of itself multiple times until it's created a more streamlined structure. The whole idea was these represented that mound, that Ra or Amun or Atun, or any combination there above, dragged above the primordial waters. So in this way you can sort of see a cyclical nature within Egyptian sort of worship of life and death. The whole idea that from the great waters the mound was brought, and so in death you were brought to the mound. But speaking of death, there's a misconception that Egyptians sort of idealized death in their culture. So all this focus on death in the form of the pyramids, the various burial tombs, art, magic, everything. So that is a little bit of a misconception. Not because they didn't do that. There was a lot of references to death in their culture. But it wasn't death they were idolizing, but rather life. Egyptians loved the concept of life itself. In fact, Mot was entirely based around the idea that in life you have to act in harmony with sort of the whole of your being. And if you were a good person or you knew the spells in the Book of the Dead, you'd be able to continue your life after death. So, Anubis, god of the various funerary rituals, embalming, etc., would weigh your heart against a feather of Mot. And if your heart was lighter than the feather, you were allowed to be given a piece of land by Osiris to till, and you'd continue your life in the realm of the dead. Except this time, you get to have Osiris as your fancy dead king. And your life basically just continued on in this cyclical nature. Except this time, no disease, no death, no want or worry. Just love, life, and lots And lots, and lots, and lots, and lots of beer. And I guess other drinks and or food too. So the specific process that one would go through upon death was they would wake up sometime after their death in their tomb, which is why it was very important for the kings especially, as living embodiments of the gods, to have been given a proper burial. But even the commoners and farmers and everyone else in the kingdom still would have had some concern for their life after death. Even if they weren't a great man in life, they could still have a great afterlife. When you died, you would be interred in, well, whatever your means was. So if you're a rich pharaoh, you'd get some form of mastaba in the earlier times, pyramids in the old kingdoms, and then eventually funerary temples. A commoner, you'd probably get something a lot simpler. Normally, maybe a small grave. Maybe if you were a wealthier farmer, or perhaps you had family, a small, simple tomb. But the point being, when you died, you would awaken after a time, guided by one of the gods of death. So Nephthys, for example, would have been one of them, there amongst many others. Anubis, Set, Wepwaret, all actually having roles in this, with Anubis specifically being an extremely important god, as you would be led towards a court of sorts, specifically the court of Osiris. And there, Anubis and Osiris would judge the dead alongside various other gods and determine whether or not you've lived a life that was worthy of being able to enter the Egyptian afterlife. And, of course, like I said, there's a lot of beer in the afterlife, as well as all your friends, family, and everything else that is good in life, because life is awesome. Have your hearts taken out of your chest and submitted to Anubis, who would then weigh the heart against the feather of Mot. They'd take your heart and weigh it against the feather, and if you were a good individual, your heart would weigh less than the feather, and if you were a bad individual, you would have been eaten then and there by the crocodile-headed Almet. However, there's another thing that would happen. After getting your soul weighed, you could recite spells from the Book of the Dead, specifically telling your heart not to betray you. Otherwise, all I can say is good luck. You would need it. There we go. Because if you get consumed by Ammit, that means you are not going into the Egyptian afterlife. You're not going to be in your paradise with your friends and family, and you're not going to be able to continue living your life after death. That's it. You're done. So yes, you would recite your spell, you'd be able to get into the afterlife after getting judged again, this time by Osiris, who would welcome you in with open arms if you were a good person and or you used magic. And then that's when all the paradise would happen. However, there's something very important, and that is grave goods. So, just going to the afterlife was not enough. You'd have to go in with grave goods, because if your family that were still alive didn't provide for you, your time in the afterlife would be much poorer. For example, if you were a poor farmer and you couldn't afford much, once you were given land in the afterlife, you'd still have to work the land, it's just you'd have no help, for example. So Egyptians tended to make a lot of statues representing farmhands that could help the deceased in their care and maintenance of the plot of land they're given. Furthermore, pottery and other forms of grave goods were very important so that the dead could enjoy their afterlife even more. Yes, living is great, but what is better than living but living the high life, according to the Egyptians. So don't just settle on having a nice afterlife. You want the premium stuff. So you'd get pottery, all the nicest pottery you had in life. You'd get offerings of food, normally your favorite things, honey, bread, tons of beer, anything your heart desires. This was what your family would provide for you, and the more important you were, say, for example, the pharaohs, the more elaborate and wealthy your grave goods would be. So Tutankhamun, for example, is famous because his grave didn't get looted until modern people showed up and looted it for him, for example. And that's the big key thing here, is that all tombs would have had grave goods, but the only grave goods that would have survived in pretty much every tomb would have been the useless stuff, the broken, the discarded. Only very few treasures have ever been found. Tutankhamun's famous because all his treasures survived. And that's what was important about his discovery. Now, how do I do this? Nope. Thank you. There we go. There we go. So this is supposed to be an offering chamber here. The living would provide some form of thing here, be it food offerings or pottery or gold or something, just so that the dead could rest a bit easier in the afterlife. Let's see. In our case, we have a couple, we have an old merchant and his dearly beloved alpaca / llama to keep him company. To assist in the afterlife, of course. So, let's see. In earlier tombs like this one, we're not going to go with anything too elaborate. Very little gold or other, like, very important things. We're just going to fill it up with a few chests and a few pots. And, yeah, there we go. And then here in the center, this is where the dead body would be kept. Now, early on, embalming and sort of mummification, that's the word I'm looking for, was very simple. In fact, actually, the dry desert did most of the work. Bodies desiccate over time. This is a natural phenomenon. Taphonomy is actually something I've briefly looked into in my studies at university. Not the most pleasant subject for those of weak stomachs. But the whole idea is the body will decay quite quickly over time. And to combat that decay, you'd go about and embalm the body. You'd dry out all the organic fluids. You'd remove any sort of tissues that would have made rotting a lot easier. For example, the stomach, the intestines, the lungs, and the brain. Actually, no, the brain was left in. But various other... what was it? Intestines, stomachs, liver, and intestine. And lungs. Anyway, I've said all four of the things, which would become known as the organs kept in the canoptic jars. Canoptic jars would not become a feature until the actual time of the pharaohs. This is still a little too early for our thing. But in these days, mummification was a very basic process. You'd mostly just get desiccated by the desert in which you were buried in. Let's see. And with that, the tomb is done. Now, technically speaking, I could add a couple flourishes to this. It's a very basic design because, once again, this is an early Mastaba. We're trying to be basic. Oh. They better not try and desecrate this tomb. I might actually have to do some preventative maintenance here. I will admit, this area in behind here, this is mostly just so I didn't have to fill in the whole thing. In fact, actually, I'm claiming these so I can use them in later builds. Yeah, this is entirely functional. Real Mastaba tombs were actually quite solid. You wouldn't have this area here. In fact, actually, you wouldn't even have that. That's mostly if I just want to come back down here and store some other grave goods later. What's up, man? Hope you enjoy your life. Forever short it will be down here. It's not too elaborate, so I'm not counting this as completion of one of our objectives, that being build an elaborate tomb. Especially since I think that has to be in a pyramid, now that I think about it. But I present to you a completed Mastaba tomb. An earlier design, of course. So the whole idea is this is where the dead of this village will be held. Specifically, probably one of the early kings of Naqada. Honestly, we don't really know the names of any kings, save for a possible, very minute possibility of one known as Bull. That may have also actually just been a reference to a location, though, so there is a chance that there was no King Bull. But if so, he would have been a rival of one of the original kings of Egypt that we do know the name of, that being Scorpion the First. Although that would be much later. For right now, we're still technically speaking on the borderlands between the Amratian and the Gurzian. And Scorpion wouldn't rise until the beginning of the third period of the Naqada. So with that done, I think I'm drawing this solo episode to a close until we can get our resident camera girl back. Hopefully she'll come back soon, and hopefully she'll have her watch with her, and then I can show her some neat tricks to do with some universal manipulation. Until then, I think I'll do a few touch-ups in the village, but I don't think you're gonna be too interested in watching every single last thing I do. So, this has been Ognajteff. Thank you guys all for watching, and I hope to catch you guys all next time on our little series here, where we finish the village in Naqada and move on to our next city, Buto, in Lower Egypt. But that is still just a little ways away. So until then, thank you guys all for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time as we continue down the road to the Old Kingdom.